see here.
Hello, Senator Austin.
Hello.
Just saying hello. Hope you had a good holiday, all that stuff.
Hi, Commissioner. Hey, Kathy.
Hey, Senator Martin, how are you?
Good. Thank you.
You guys got to turn your other computer off.
I don't have one on here.
It's not you, Commissioner.
Oh.
It's somebody else. So Roland, we have people here, just so you know. Room
Yep.
1.
Excellent. Yeah, no, for the oversight hearings, it's a little bit easier for the commissioners to make presentations via Zoom, and there's no real public feedback component to them. They're not public hearings in the same way that other meetings are. So we thought it'd be easier for everyone to do these via Zoom. But the room is available for the public who wants to come in and wishes to watch it in public on the screens in those rooms.
Good to see you, Representative Lamar.
Good to see you, Commissioner. How are you?
I'm great.
Do I have to call you Czar during these meetings?
No, just Mark is good.
Yeah.
Kathy's known me for years, so Mark is good.
My internet is a little off, so Senator Cohen will be leading most of this morning's discussion. Out of no disrespect, I think I am inarticulable at moments because of my internet, so it'll be Senator Cohen taking charge this morning.
All right. Are we ready to go, Sam?
We should be all set, Madam Chair. We're ready to go. We're ready to start whenever you are all ready.
Okay. Well, let's get going then. Welcome everybody to this transportation oversight hearing. We're joined by Commissioner Mark Boughton, who's going to give us an update on, from the Connecticut bipartisan infrastructure law team, as well as on the Infrastructure Act dollars and the spends there. And so we look forward to hearing from you. Before we get going, I don't know if there's any remarks from my co-chair, Representative Lamar, or our ranking members.
I'll be really quick and just want to thank you, Commissioner, for your time here today, updating us on how we've fared over the last year. I know we've fared quite well, and you've been monitoring that process and progress. It's an incredible opportunity for us in the state. We have in transportation the 20-year long-range capital plan, the 5-year capital plan, and the 2-year bonding cycle that we traditionally oversee. And I know this is an opportunity to advance a number of those projects. So we'd love to hear from you about project prioritization, how you're going about accessing funds, how you're monitoring those. And we look forward to your conversation today. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Any comments from our ranking members?
Just wanted to say good morning, Mr. Boughton. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. I'm Representative Kennedy from the 119th, and I am new to this committee, but I am looking forward to hearing your remarks today and moving forward. So thank you, Senator Cohen.
Thank you. And Senator Wong, any comments from you, sir? Don't see. All right. Well, we'll get started. As Representative Lamar mentioned, it's been an exciting time for us in terms of getting some real federal dollars and the availability of some grant dollars for, to provide matching funds and just real opportunity into the state of Connecticut. So we look forward to hearing from you, Commissioner, with an update on that. And so thanks for being here. Go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you for having me, and glad to be back. I'll actually be I got to be over at the LOB at 1 for a finance hearing. So we'll try to keep this as tight as we can. We have prepared a deck for you, which we're sharing with you right now. If you don't have it, let us know. But the idea here really is to give two things. One, sort of an overview of what it is that we do at CT Bill, and how are we deploying it, as Senator Cohen had mentioned and Representative Lamar had mentioned. How are we deploying these dollars? Who has the responsibility for that? And the reporting requirements as you begin your deliberations throughout the spring. So as you know, a year ago, President Biden signed into law the Infrastructure Investment Acts, or as we call it, the BIL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. That law really encompasses 19 federal agencies, 380 unique programs, and it is a historic investment in infrastructure needs. It combines incremental funding with new programs plus many net new dollars for us. And it was a surface transportation reauthorization, which provides the next 5 years of funding. And there are new programs embedded within the surface transportation reauthorization. The law is comprised of $1.2 trillion. That includes $550 billion in net new spending, and an additional $650 billion in already authorized funds. And you see the pie chart there. The authorized funding is on the left. That is, the way to look at it is that's plus up money. That's existing programs, existing things that we do where there's been more money added to it. So if we have more than this, but if we had $100 million in the paving program, we now have $140 million in the paving program for this year. That plus up goes on for about 6 years. And all across the United States of America, but here in Connecticut as well. And you also see new funding. New funding are basically competitive grant programs that are out there. They might be competitive in the existing program we have, but they also are brand new program, totally competitive. Got to go out there and compete for it, put in an application and try to get it. $270 billion of that 550 is in transportation. 185 billion is in utilities, 71 billion is in environment, and there's about $24 billion of other money that's out there. That's for things like wells, capping of wells, water resources, stuff like that you see a lot out in West and in other areas of the country that they're struggling with. So it really is historic, but it's a 6 year, 5 to 7 year program, what I tell people when we're out talking. So it takes time. It takes time for water to wash through the system. It takes time for projects to be prioritized and identified, and it takes time for you to win those grants. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides. Okay, so people say, well, okay, what do you do? All right, we already have a great commissioner designee of DOT. We have a great commissioner designee of DEEP and DPH, terrific people. They actually will monitor the projects and prioritize the project as Representative Lamar had asked. So they'll look at doing the Gold Star Bridge, or they'll look at realigning an intersection as far as the state grants go, right? So that's what they do. It's our job to keep everybody focused on climate mitigation resilience, which we work through DEEP, workforce and economic development, which we work through OWS, because we got to have employees to do all this work. And of course, smart growth principles that have been widely distributed and adopted throughout the state. It's our responsibility to make sure that we're rapidly applying for it and deploying funds, and we'll have some feedback for you on how we've done in that area. It's our responsibility to maximize funding impact through matching and partnerships, working together with NGOs, cities and towns, COGS, all the stakeholders out there to try to braid as much money together as we can to do a particular project. Our job is to empower agencies. So I'm a force multiplier for all of those agencies. I handle stuff that they and my team handle stuff that they can't get to, whether it's shagging down certain documents or looking through different grant opportunities, or just working with them in a community and trying to put everybody together in one room to make sure that DOT is getting what they need to do this job. We also coordinate with other New England states. We have a very vibrant and active Northeast Corridor group that meets every month. Each state has identified a coordinator like myself. So we have 50 of them across the United States of America. All of them report directly to the governor and to the legislature, as I do. But also we report to each other. And it's a great forum for us to share ideas and thoughts. A lot of that's led by the NGA, the National Governors Association. They do a phenomenal job. I got to really hand it to them. We meet once a quarter in Washington. We've met with all the stakeholders, including the president's team, multiple times. I'm lucky that I know Mitch Landrieu. He's heading up the investment out of the White House, that team. So we're fairly close, and we met through the mayor's group before this. So it's been really beneficial for us to work with that organization. We also make sure that equity is considered in all of these infrastructure improvements and investments, and we look for innovation. I know a better place for innovation is within our first selectman and mayor's offices, but also at our COGS and with our team at DOT as it relates to surface transportation, and that's where I'm going to try to keep things focused on. Okay, Steve? Okay, so what does that mean for Connecticut? We anticipate receiving $6.4 billion over 5 years. So far, we received $2.2 billion. As I mentioned, it's a mix of formula funding and competitive grants, and the implementation timelines vary greatly. A lot of this money is embedded in federal highway or within our DOT. That's 3.5. But remember, DOT, as you well know, also handles public transportation. There's 1.3 billion. And a new program for local municipalities, bridges at $561 million over the next 5 years. The DPH is handling clean water drinking, and that's really a lead pipe replacement program at $445 million. Broadband is being handled by DEEP. Airports obviously work through DOT. That money's already, that 62 million has already been deployed. And we have other grants that have come through for planning and design and things like that at roughly $72 million. So this money is already out there. It's already washing through the system. If you're driving up and down 84, 95, the Mare, whatever route you take, 91 to get here, and you see orange cones, that's IDGA money at work. So what it's done is it's taken a project that maybe it cost $5 million to do. And we've been able to offset that a little bit by using $2 million and moving the project up on our timeline. So maybe DOT wanted to do that project in 26, 27 because they didn't have funding designated or they didn't have enough funding. IDGA has allowed us to move that up to 22, 23, and 24. So you're seeing a lot of activity, a lot of orange cones out there. And that's that money being deployed on projects that have been sitting on the books for many, many years. Commissioner Giletti, who has recently left us, and Garrett Uglito, who is our commissioner designee, have done a phenomenal job at deploying these resources. They've really worked hard. They're great people, as well as Commissioner Dykes and as well as Commissioner Duthani. So got a great team, and we meet and talk every month about priorities and what's happening with the program. Steve? Here's how we're set up internally, just for those folks that are interested. So as you know, I have my other job, which is collecting $22 billion in taxes. Had a great year last year, and we're looking at a really solid year this year. And that's been incredibly rewarding, and it's an honor to do. But also the governor asked me to handle infrastructure, the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law as a senior advisor. Below me is our deputy advisor, that's Steve Nocera. Steve does a lot of the legwork along with Taylor Thorpe. You might know Taylor from House Democrats. So he does a lot of the tracking and budgeting. We have IIJA fellow. Fellows are governor's fellows that are one-year contractual employees. We have one at DOT that works for Garrett, one at DEEP that works with Commissioner Dykes, and one at Officer of Workforce Strategies that works with the commissioner there. So all three of those folks are using that program, which has been wonderful, and happy to tell you more about it, but I don't want to tie up your time. We do have a vacancy. We do have one fellow as well. Sorry, Ryan, that works with us also on budgetary issues. Okay. Here's, I think this map is really telling. This is the map of announced bipartisan infrastructure law projects in Connecticut as of the 1-year anniversary. You can see the distribution throughout Connecticut. It's every congressional district and every region, every area. There is an interactive map that DOT has launched where you can drill down and you can see the funding source on each of these projects, and it'll go through each one. They've done a great job with doing that. And we also have a project tracker that we have developed, a greenfield. In other words, we didn't have any tracker. We now have our own project tracker that we share with departments, and they update it consistently about grant opportunities, as well as, and all agencies looking on it, check and provide feedback for almost on a daily basis. You see the dollar figures on the right that are assigned to different projects, bridges. This is as of November 22nd, so it's even gone up a little bit. This does include the Gold Star Bridge money that's there, high-speed internet, highway funding formula, clean water I mentioned to you, ports and waterways, as well as network charging. Each of those things are going through their initial scoping for construction, particularly network. For those of you that drive electric vehicles, you're going to see more charging stations up and down the 84, 91, and 95 corridors, as that's phase one of this program from the federal government. Later on, we'll branch out into individual communities where we can find strategic partnerships. So here's some of the highlights for CONDOT, for CTDOT. Over $1.6 billion has been announced for Connecticut's roads, bridges, roadway safety, and other major projects. That comes through the highway funding formula that I previously mentioned to you, formula bridge funding, which, so we had that program. Now, instead of having 300 million, we've got 600 million to spend in there. I'm just making that number up, but that's how it works. And then the RAISE program, which those grants were announced. We won funding for accessibility improvements at Ansonia, Beacon Falls, and Seymour stations that serve the Waterbury line. Almost $30 million at accessibility, handicap accessibility improvements at those stations. As I mentioned earlier, the Gold Star Bridge is probably our largest single grant so far. It's $158 million. That is roughly a $400 million replacement program, but this really almost pays for almost half and really gets us going quicker and moves up the timeline. You know, I know that Senator Olson can tell you there are 21 different detours you have to take right now if you have a vehicle that can't cross the Gold Star Bridge. So it's going to make a big difference in moving goods and services around Connecticut. We've also put out $242 million we've received for Connecticut bridges, and that does not include the Gold Star Bridge Award, which is a big issue in cities and towns that struggle with replacing their bridges. And then $2 million in local and regional project assistance grants for Stanford's West Main Street corridor planning. They would love to have a new train station there. Not there yet, but they are working on their planning, and so they've got a planning grant to facilitate that. This doesn't include congressionally directed spending that's out there. And when I talk about braiding, we've been able to focus teams of congressional staff to say, okay, if we got a little bit of age of money, and if Congressman, if he or she can get X, now we have enough money to do the whole project. And so when we talk, and if the city or town puts in money and the state kicks in a few bucks, you start to see stuff really happen and really roll. Okay, Steve. For DEEP, not that it's under, you may have pieces that are under your purview, but one of the things that's working really well here in Connecticut, not so much in some other states, has been getting our agencies to work together. They're great. They're all strategic partners. They communicate on a daily basis again about, hey, are you going to do this? Are you going to open up, put a water line? Well, then we should make sure that we look at paving for that area. They're communicating well, and that really hasn't been a challenge for Connecticut. But you'll see just quickly, $36.5 million for Bridgeport Harbor for coastal storm management, $19 million to build a network of EV chargers. I mentioned that to you, and that's really that is one of those teamed approaches between DEEP and DOT. Grants for electric school buses in Cornwall, Falls Village, Sharon, and Hartford. That was over $8.8 million in EPA's Clean School Bus Program. By the way, the EPA's Clean School Bus Program doesn't necessarily mean you have to go electric. You could use an alternative clean fuel, propane, for example, if you wanted to. And there's $2.5 billion on each side of that for the country, about $5 billion to rotate the fleets over. 127,000 households in Connecticut are enrolled in the Affordable Connectivity Program for broadband. And $4.5 million has been allocated to Connecticut cleaning up Superfund and brownfield sites. And we have a very robust and hardworking internet infrastructure team that's got $100 million, and that's working on, between state money and federal money, that's working on completing our mapping and beginning the rollout of what that'll look like for your individual communities. Okay, Steve. Drinking water, DPH. we're in line for $150 million to replace lead pipes. You know, that was a big issue in Flint, Michigan, for example. This program has about $453 million over 5 years. Connecticut would need about $4 billion to replace all of its lead pipes. But it helps. As a former mayor, I would welcome that help from the state and the federal government to sort of jumpstart our program of lead pipe replacement. Number one challenge that we face in terms of drinking water. And also, there's money in the revolving fund. There's also money in the drinking water emerging contaminants program. That's PFAS that you hear a lot about. And of course, other contaminants that are emerging right now that we may not know about that we're starting to see could be a problem. Salt, for example, in Eastern Connecticut, if you live out that way. Okay, Steve. And finally, workforce is a critical issue, sometimes not talked about enough. You know, at DOT, we've been on a hiring spree, if you will, in a very positive way, moving people through our process at DAS to get more engineers on board, more staff, in every aspect of that agency. Commissioner Euclidis, the designee Euclidis has been working really hard at recruitment, and so is the team there. And that's been going well. We're also receiving a lot of support from workforce strategy, because we also need people to actually do the work. We need people to actually help drive the heavy equipment, to do the engineering for outside engineering firms that we utilize at DOT as well. So all those things have been doing well, and we've been working at training them. The Clean Energy Council is one of those that's been great, and the governor has issued an executive order to begin helping them transform our workforce to be able to address some of these new needs that we're going to have out there. Things like wind turbines that are going out in New London area, stuff like that, where we need people to repair them. Even the EV charging networks. One of the challenges that we saw in the UK, where they were successful at deploying them everywhere, is maintenance. And so you pull up with your Tesla, and if the fitting doesn't fit in it, and there's only 3 chargers there, you could be in trouble. You could be out of electricity. So it's critical that you add a maintenance component to all of these new chargers that we're putting up. And we're going to need people to know how to do that. And that's what's great about being able to embrace the new economy of clean energy. I mentioned earlier, but it's really important. Justice 40 initiative is embedded in every piece of guidance that's dropped in the new program. So some of you may wonder, well, how does this work? Doesn't really tell me how this works. It happens like this. A federal agency will drop guidance really any point during the week, except for federal DOT. They've given us a schedule of when we can expect guidance. And in that guidance, it'll be attached to a NOFO, a notice of funding. It says, hey, we got $5 billion we want to spend on catch basins. Here's our guidance on how to do it. That's usually a couple 100 pages long. And here's who qualifies. But in that guidance is embedded the Justice 40 initiative, which really looks at making sure that money flows to disadvantaged communities who have been marginalized, underserved, overburdened, pollution, divided by highways, which is a big issue here in Connecticut, as we know. And it's created 2 separate Connecticut's in many ways. So that's part of what DOT does, and part of what they're doing is they have their own office now set up that looks at the initiative and the requirements of the guidance and then implements that in the design, so that we can make sure that when we're giving out money, we're doing it in an equitable and fair way. Okay, just a couple of thoughts and reminders. As I mentioned, guidance has not been issued on many new programs. Part of what the build team does is reads every page of guidance that comes out. Even if it's a program that may not apply to Connecticut, we want to know about it, because oftentimes they are updating guidance if they can't give the money out. There's not a big chunk of money. This is not like ARPA, where we got dropped off $6 billion and said, go spend it. You have to compete, you have to apply, and you have to make sure that you have a program that they want to invest in. We've asked through our COGS, our local economic development teams, to identify projects and ensure that there is an active plan or planning that's going on about that. As a state representative or state senator, you might want to remind your mayors and first selectmen, hey, this money's out there. Make sure you have updated plans, and make sure you contact Mark or Steve, and we'll help walk them through the process of applying for it. All cities and towns, and we'll talk about Safe Streets for All at the end here, are required to have some kind of local match. Sometimes it's 90% federal money, 10% local. It might be 80% federal money, 20% local. They want skin in the game, the federal government does. And that's true for the state as well. And I know that OPM's been working hard at reflecting that in the budget you're going to look at shortly. So I've talked to mayors and first selectmen about how to leverage their ARPA money. I explained to many of them they should put a reserve on leftover ARPA money for these kinds of projects so they can use it. We're really looking for a coordinated strategy, and that's where the COGS have been instrumental in helping people think regional and be regional, so that you don't have a similar project going on in two communities side by side, that they're all talking and they're understanding what the impact will be for the entire region. So you have to be patient with this program too. You have a lot of bureaucracy, particularly in Washington. Connecticut's a little bit different. We're a small state. We all talk to each other and we can move stuff along. But it is a challenge for us. And I've been spending more time than I thought down in Washington talking to some of the key stakeholders there and keeping this paperwork moving. Safe Streets for All is a program that goes directly to municipalities, cities and towns. Significant amount of money and resources in there, from doing everything from intersections to handicap accessibility. There's a lot of money there. Connecticut submitted around 20 applications for Safe Streets for All. That's good for the first year, but they're going to be reopening the window again in the spring, late spring. Our goal is to double that to 40. Now you might think we have 169 cities and towns, Mark, and we're only getting 40 applicants. A lot of this is planning money that's going out the door, but also we're way ahead of other states. Arizona, large state, did not submit a single application for Safe Streets for All. The federal government told me, Mark, we expected 2,500 applications for this money. We only got 800 nationally. So we're actually doing very well with this. And oftentimes we get calls from literally, I took a call from the White House last week about what are we doing to move stuff along versus, why can't they get it moving in other states? But also the team has really embraced this, and each of our agencies has embraced this program, as well as OPM have done a phenomenal job at helping us move dollars through the system and deploy it. You're going to see a lot more. People ask me all the time, what's the state going to look like in 5 years? I said, there's going to be a lot of new construction, but there's going to be a lot of cones up as well. But it's all for the greater good, so that we can move goods and services in an equitable and fair way around state, help our businesses and help our communities. Next slide, Steve. Okay, we have all these resources for you. We can get this deck out to the committee, and you're welcome to click on or read through them. Kind of fascinating. We have our own CT Built homepage. It's a landing page that lists out our programs and projects, as well as a tracker that we've worked on and developed, so people can know exactly what's happening, where this money is going to. Just mentioned NGA to you, wonderful resource. Okay, Steve, go next one. These are the folks that are leading the charge: Steve Nasser, Taylor Thorpe, myself, and Ryan Hughes, who is our fellow. And we've touched pretty much all across the area. So with that, I'm sure you have a lot of questions and thoughts, and I wanted to stop there. I know it's kind of a tedious deck, but it's important on how all this works.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really appreciate that thorough presentation, and I know the committee will appreciate having that deck. So if you can get that to our Samuel for distribution, it would be greatly appreciated. Can I just ask a couple of clarifying questions, and then I'll go to those who have their hands raised. You mentioned the 50 projects that have been identified. Could you just clarify that is the 2.2 billion that is already dollars into Connecticut, or the 50 projects include those that are outside the 2.2 billion that we're projecting we'd like to receive funding for?
Yeah, that's outside the program, and that's applications we have in. I did check in, so I can't advocate for a specific project with Washington, but I can check in nicely. And I did check in last week, and they felt they were very pleased about Connecticut's applications, and they thought we'd be seeing some results from the work that we've done here. But that's all they would tell me. But it's my job to put the plug in for us.
That's great. And obviously, you mentioned these competitive grants. They are very competitive. We've gotten the Gold Star dollars. Do you feel that we're prepared in Connecticut to apply for these grants and be good contenders for other grants going forward? And I just would ask if, because we did get such a large chunk for the Gold Star, if that comes into consideration at all as they go through this grant process for other projects potentially.
Sure. So the Gold Star came out of a bridge program. There are only, I think, a handful that were awarded across the country. It certainly will not impact us in other considerations. There are states that are really struggling with this program and how to put an application. I will say to you that I anticipate us doing very well at the state level. I think our agencies and and OPM too has been very helpful at moving things through the garden hose, if you will, of trying to get stuff moving, right? And so I feel strongly that we'll do well with our state competitive grant applications. We are working with our cities and towns. I think that's the area that needs, and that's part of my job, is to work with mayors and first selectmen to get them focused on this, to get them to understand how important it is, and money that, you know, they only need a little bit of money to leverage a lot of federal money. And I think that the smaller the town, the more they struggle with this, because they don't have a town planner, they don't have a town engineer, maybe they outsource that, or maybe they share it with the COG. And that's why we brought in the Council of Governments to help us as a force multiplier for these smaller towns. So I've even asked some of the larger cities to help out in a very unique application for a smaller town, and they've been really good about doing that. But I think that's the area where we're gonna have to keep working at. And I think, again, somebody who, with my skill set, I had worked in that arena for 20 years. I've actually shown first selectmen where they can find their matching dollars when they need it, or how to access that. And they've been super appreciative of that. But I do spend a lot of time, probably met with over 100 stakeholders in this last year of elected officials. In fact, I'll be in Winstead and Windsor next week, meeting with those folks, because it's important. It's in a continual education process. And of course, when there's election, you got to, you know, educate the new folks that are coming in if there's been a change in leadership. So I don't say I worry. I just know that they're going to need a little more TLC getting through the process, because there's a lot of money out there, particularly in safe streets for cities and towns.
So how are we handling that communication process with our towns? Are we going directly through the COGS, and who's the conduit? Do you have folks in your program that are working to communicate with municipalities?
Yeah, we do both. I've met with every COG executive director, and we meet as a group to talk about where we are and what's happening in the build program. But I also get inquiries and requests I like to do site visits, particularly of a project that may be complex or a little bit complicated. I was in Bolton a couple of weeks ago because it's hard to understand sometimes what they're asking for, or how to take that project and get it to fit within the infrastructure law or not. Sometimes I say, can't be done. You know, there's no way of getting we get a lot of requests for buildings, for example, and buildings aren't really covered under the bipartisan infrastructure law, but I've been able to help them. Talk to this congressperson. Let's try to put in a bond request for you. So they contact our office. They come off the website, but I've also met with CCM, Cost, all of their, been at all of their meetings, and we do webinars every quarter for every mayor and first selectman, or if they're busy, they can send their town planner or their city engineer to listen. So it's been they've been great, but again, as a mayor, you're sometimes busy just filling the pothole, and you're not thinking, oh wait, I got to get this in by next Friday. That's where we step in and help them out.
Okay, great. And like last question, and then I'll defer to my co-chair for his questions and comments. But what do you see as our biggest challenge in the state in qualifying for some of these? Do you think it's workforce? Do you think it's matching funds? What could we be doing better to better position ourselves to win these dollars?
Yeah, I think, people always ask me that question when we do forums, what keeps you up in the middle of the night about this program? It's about, after our retirement surge last year, it's about backfilling those positions. We only turn out about 200 civil engineers from all of our universities in state, right? So we'll never fill the need at DOT between, the retirement program and between just general attrition that goes on, people changing jobs, people retiring and meeting that age naturally. So it's a lot of work, and we really have worked hard at moving people through the hiring system. And there's a lot of competition out there from outside non-government engineering firms, because they know money's flowing too, and so they're offering more, and they may be offering $10,000, $20,000 more salary, or full remote working, or all kinds of things. That's going to be a challenge for us, but we are meeting that challenge. I think better than I thought, but I worry about it. And then, construction firms, they're ramping up, they're getting busy, and they get filled up quickly. There's only a few construction firms that can fix a sewer plant and rehab a sewer plant. Once you get them all booked up across the country now you're going to be paying top dollar plus inflation. It can get expensive. So it's something we just need to watch and manage.
All right, appreciate that insight, and go to my co-chair, Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Chairman Cohen. Thank you, Commissioner Czar. I appreciate the time this morning. Senator Cohen did a great job getting to a number of the questions and concerns I had, and in your answers, you illuminated, I think, things that I'd hope to hear more about. The staffing challenges that we have in our state are not unique to Connecticut, but they are an opportunity for us to talk about what Connecticut can do to best position ourselves. And I appreciate the role that you've played in articulating that today. I think those of us who worked with the Department of Transportation know we're not down a few dozen. We're down hundreds of important staff positions internal to the DOT. We've made some changes in how we go about, recruiting talent, trying to quickly move that process. But there are still challenges that we have in our internal hiring processes, and I'm hoping you and your role can help advocate for DOT as well to move those things along. And I know that will be one of the chief limitations of the success of this program in Connecticut is our ability to attract, hire, retain talented engineers who can complete these projects in an expeditious manner. So I do appreciate you highlighting it, and I do appreciate any help that you can provide internally to move that along. You highlighted the coordination that your office plays with respect to municipalities and COGS. And I think that was something I'd like you to illuminate a little bit more if you can, because the nature of the dollars and the extent of the dollars that are available are unique in that we're not really competing with each other. Like if New Haven puts in an application, it's not in direct competition with an application in Danbury or Hartford or Stamford. In fact, it's mostly us all working together to get as many projects as possible for Connecticut. And that's unique in the transportation space where for decades, really, we've sort of been working in competition with one another at the COG and local levels. Knowing if my application is successful, it likely means that yours isn't. And I think that role, what had a lot of communities concerned at the beginning was whether or not they would get a fair shake. But you've really done an incredible job of going out to communities, going out to COGs, and letting them know that if you get your stuff together, if you get your act together locally, and if there's anything that we can do to help you get your applications in, we're all in a good spot. This isn't a picking favorites at the state level. It's not you picking favorites. You really embrace the role of ambassador for this program in a way that I'm really proud of. And can you let me know how well it's being received for entities that are normally used to competing with each other? Are they able to work together? Are they able to share talent and experience and data to help develop these applications?
Yeah, thank you for those kind comments. They absolutely are. There was some, I wouldn't say concern, just puzzlement about, well, what's this all about? What are you trying to do here? This is early on in the program. The only challenge we have there is that each COG has very different resources. So I used to be a member of West COG. They have a vast amount of resources. They have big staff, right? Northwest COG has a very small staff. So their capacity or an ability to be able to execute a grant application is vastly different. And that's something that we're working on right now. Grant writers are in demand. Unfortunately, they're very hard to find. Being able to tell a narrative, being able to write that story for the federal government and answer and scope all these projects is difficult. And the smaller the town, they usually struggle with that. So there are certainly some private firms that can do that work for them. But I think it's an area where I think COGS can be a force multiplier in being able to staff up a little bit more. And remember, you can get 3% of these grants you can use for administrative costs. So it's not unheard of to be able to do that. But I think the more capacity we can offer in grant writing, the more money we're going to get back, right? At the end of the day, it's what it's going to be back. When the governor asked me to do this, I said, look, formulary speaking, we're set to get about a best guess about $6 billion. I want to get you $8 billion. But to get 8 billion, we got to really push our cities and towns to apply for anything and everything that's out there. They've been great. They're very interested. Our calls, our quarterly calls generate about 140 people on the line. They try getting 140 mayors and first selectmen and staff together for anything is the challenge. And they stay there for the full 50. I only keep it to 55 minutes. That's it. I know how busy they are. So the COGS, I think, really are the source of talent for us, help, but some of the smaller ones could definitely use some capacity.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I got one more question. We're going to turn it over to a lot of other folks. And I know your time is limited. And it's about a topic we've not avoided for the last year or so, but we've kind of soft touched on. There was an unfortunate article in the Connecticut Mirror last week that I think only painted half of a picture about the current funding levels that we have available to us through our SPO and the robustness of our SPO funding for ongoing projects moving forward. The suggestion in that article was that we have plenty of money and we're just not spending it all that quickly. Could you give me, like, wearing both hats, a sense for how you feel about the current status of our SPO, our ability to adequately pay for projects as they come through the pipeline to hit our local requirement and state match requirements, and whether or not we feel that we are capable with our current funding mechanisms of fully maximizing the number of projects that we might be available for, or will we in upcoming years have to think of new funding mechanisms to further buttress that fund?
Yeah, I will say this. I think we have the resources available to maximize, the state does, to maximize every aspect of this program and other just general projects that are out there. There's not a nexus between how much you borrow in terms and how many projects you can complete, right? So you never want to have authorization on the books that would require you or makes you or has so much money that you can't execute the amount of projects in any given year. I think that what you'll see going forward is that number that we're bonding is really irrelevant when you look at what the impact is out there to our transportation system. It's more about what's the impact, what can we execute in a particular year or 2-year period in the case with a biennium. And so you never really borrow more than you need. Having said that, there are, whether it's general obligation bonds, transportation bonds, whatever the issue might be, we have enough capacity to do what needs to be done for the bill, for that program, but also for all the other stuff that gets worked on. I think OPM's done a marvelous job. I certainly believe they'll tell that story in the next couple of weeks as they begin rolling out the spending package for next year that will be worked on by the legislature. I feel really good where we are, and I'm not worried about that piece. I'm a little concerned, as I mentioned, about cities and towns, because I've been there and I know that world, and I know, $500,000 for a very small town is a big deal. And then you got your process, right? So you got town meeting, or do they have to have a referendum? You can have 20 people show up to town meeting and scuttle a really good intersection change that might leverage, $3 million in federal money. I worry about that. So I'm working with one of the things is Treasury put out new guidance last week saying you can use some of your ARPA money for general projects now. And I think that's going to be a big help to a lot of those folks. Sorry if that was a roundabout answer.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll see you in 45 minutes.
Thank you.
That was really helpful. I see our ranking member, Senator Huang, has his hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Broughton, for your hard work and dual role of being Commissioner of Revenue Services and obviously this infrastructure program. One of the Senate Republicans' priorities is to kind of support the successful execution of this, transit infrastructure project money is to take advantage of this money, but also to kind of ask for transparency. And one of your slides, you talked about what we've accomplished and you gave out certain numbers on that. Is there a website or a public information of those kind of undertaking projects and what future projects you may have? And the second part of that question is, are those kind of data points and information and project statuses and priorities done in concert with the CT Department of Transportation?
Yeah, let me just check in with Steve on this. We are doing a website. Let me just check on the status of the website. Steve, do you have any information for Senator Wong?
Yes. So first of all, the DOT has an active projects website, which does delineate out what is funded through this program on their website. And it's also linked from the CT Built homepage. One of the things with websites is you're trying to spin them up fast. So we are working to get additional information and always, sort of improving upon our homepage. It's sort of an iterative model, and we're working with I know that DPH has a lot of great stories to tell. They recently were in the paper with their lead replacement program. And I know the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has a very robust section of their website, which details out everything they're doing with this program. So as part of our mission, we're going to be looking to collate and aggregate those into one space to make it a little more user-friendly, but the information is certainly transparent and public as it is today.
Thank you very much. Now, our focus via the Transportation Committee is you have ongoing projects, but do you have readily available a prioritization of projects that you have lined up? As the commissioner mentioned, project ready initiatives are really important, but do you have a prioritization of looming projects that the BUILT program in concert with DOT that is also readily transparent and available and forthcoming on a website or any other access of information?
Sure. I think I would defer to Commissioner Designee Euclid about that, but he does have a list. I'm sure he'll get it out to you. Again, a lot of it's based on can we execute it in the time period of the biennium, and what's beyond the biennium, and then funding source will be critical. So hard part with this is that you don't know you got the grant till you got the grant. So that's the challenge. And the federal government has been really, they've been consistent. I heard this said once on the floor of the House, consistently inconsistent with when they drop their notifications. They do drop them, but they're Monday or Wednesday, next month, next year. It depends on how their workflow is going. So he does have that. He can give you a snapshot of that. And I certainly believe he's worked very hard on developing that list. He really, truly is doing a phenomenal job.
And I appreciate that, Commissioner. And I think your message of, getting your projects ready for all of our municipal leaders that we support in the towns that we represent is critical. They need to start putting projects together. And I think the request of DOT to get an understanding and prioritization of their projects in some cases may be a wake-up call to a lot of our municipal leaders that they're not on the list and that they have a lot of work to make up. And I think it comes back to a chicken or the egg situation, right? But more information is elemental and critical for us in our representative role to various communities that may have infrastructure, in this case, transportation, but other areas that you mentioned, to be able to get benefits of this kind of once in a lifetime federal funding to take advantage, because once that's passed, it's gone. But also the competition is highly competitive and very intense. And I would encourage for us to get as much information and go back to our districts and advocate and ensure that needy projects get the necessary funding in this phase. So I appreciate your time on this, and I know it's a conversation we're going to continue to have. But again, I want to applaud and thank you for the work you've done in a dual role that you've taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Just want to reiterate, Chairman Cohen, any legislator has a mayor, first selectman that wants me to come out, wants team to come out, give them my number. I will happily do it. I've been doing it for the last year, so feel free to offer that to them. I may ask some questions up front to see if it would potentially qualify, but even if it doesn't, I've gone out and helped some folks solve a few problems. So happy to do that and offer that. And you're welcome to be with us. If you're not in session, we can schedule around you to make sure that you're there as well.
I appreciate that very much. I see Senator Austin with her hand up, followed by Representative O'Day.
Thank you very much, Senator Cohen. Commissioner, I have a couple of questions. One, I know that Roland, Chairman Lamar talked a little bit about staffing, and I'm wondering, because I looked at the Representative Walker and I look at the staffing issues around the state, trying to make sure that we're getting people to fill positions, but there are over 600 empty positions in DOT. Do you know, does the IIJA help out with staffing levels so that we can get them up to the level they should be at?
You know, the short answer is yes and no. You could charge off some of your staffing to the grant up to 3%, but remember, you got to have the staff to do that to begin with, right? So that's really the challenge that we have in Connecticut. We have the jobs. It's finding trained folks that can meet the standard that DOT needs. So I would just check in with Garrett. I think they've done. I think they're down, but not. I want to say the numbers are on 400 or so, but they have a lot of positions open. You're 100% correct. So they don't do much on the workforce training side. There are a lot of national conferences that I've been going to, blow in for a day, and some states are doing hiring right on the spot. So if you're there for, a national engineers conference, they bring their laptop and they sit there with their personnel folks and human resource folks, and they've been hiring graduates right on the spot. So definitely it's out there, and we've been getting creative with hiring bonuses and things like that as well.
So so I'm going to go back to asking you, what changes would you recommend for us to do hiring on the spot for staffing in some critical positions relative to DOT, DPH, and DEP to help with the spending out of these dollars? Is there changes that you would make that would allow us to do some spending on the hiring on the spot?
I will. The governor has asked that we review the hiring process in general. I think it's if you look at the CREATES report, it was spread out significantly long time. That's been crunched significantly by DAS. They had a record month last month at hiring. So Commissioner Gilman's been working on that. But I think that's worthy of discussion. I do want to do a further analysis, though, exactly where is the hang up. Now, there's some union rules that get involved that we have to wait 30 days or 60 days and leave a position open. That's a challenge for us here in the sense, not the union, but the rule, in the sense that we need to get people going right away. So I'd like to get back to you on that, Senator Olson, with some further thoughts, if I might. I just want to recheck my notes on it.
So I don't want to leave this part of the conversation without saying I've heard that it's the unions that stand in the way, and I've gone to union leadership, and they indicate that they're more than willing to work to get more people. It only does them good to see more members come in. So if we could talk about that, that would be great. Also, when you talked about the number of individual grants besides the direct dollars that we got, the grant writing itself, is that done by the individual agency? So does DEEP do its own grant writing? Does DPH do its own grant writing, and DOT do their own grant writing?
Yes, that's correct. Depending on what the area of each of they're working on. Now the cities and towns, not to complicate things, they'll write their grant. They submit their grant to us at Connecticut Bill. We review it for them. We then forward it over to DOT, for example, if it's a surface transportation grant they're looking for, just to make sure that this fits in with the state's master plan. I give them a positive letter for Washington, and DOT gives them a positive letter for Washington for consideration. But within each agency, they have their own teams that write the grants. That's correct.
Thank you. And then our fine co-chair from the Senate talked a bit about the Gold Star Bridge, and we received $158 million for the Gold Star Bridge. And my understanding is that project was a $300 million project. Do the additional dollars come out of the other IIJA money, or is that the state that's paying that? In which case it would not be that would be closer to a 50-50 split instead of an 80-20 split. So I'm just curious where the other dollars are coming from. Yes, I'm very concerned about getting the Gold Star Bridge up and running. We'd like to take some pressure off of the Mohegan-Pequot Bridge and a number of other local bridges.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that side of the state, so I'm 100% with you. So that money will supplant transportation bonds that we would have had afloat to build the bridge. So we'll be able to redeploy that money elsewhere on another project.
So I just want to make sure I get that. So, so in the entirety of the Gold Star Bridge will now be covered by federal dollars? Is that what you're saying?
No, we'll still have a balance due from the state, but it'll be less than what we thought it was.
Okay, if you could get me that breakdown, that would be great. All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Austin, for raising important questions. And I suspect that we'll be hearing more at our DOT oversight hearing about the workforce challenges as well. Representative O'Day.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. Actually, good afternoon, Commissioner. How are you?
Doing great.
Just a couple of follow-ups. The good chair from the Senate had asked a lot of my questions regarding point of contact, and you were gracious enough to say that, you know, that our towns could reach out directly to you. In an effort to try and you know, spread out the demands that you're going to hear from the towns, is Tyler Thorpe or Stephen? I see Stephen Nocera online here. Are they tasked with anything specific that we can kind of refer our towns to?
Sure. So Taylor does a lot of the financial tracking as it works through our system with the state. Also spends a lot of time liaisoning with the legislature, both the Senate and the House. And Steve handles a lot of the requests that come in, vets through them. Both of those, all three of those folks read every piece of guidance that comes through so they can narrow, 300 pages down to a single sheet for a particular mayor, per selectman, as well as reading all the state guidance that comes out. Updates the tracker on a daily basis in terms of what grants are available and where they're available. And Steve will go on site visits with me from time to time, depending on what the program or project is. So both of them we keep them moving pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done here with a spend like this.
Thank you very much for that. And to your point earlier, you had said, Commissioner, that, you know, the cities have grant writers in place and have a lot more interaction with the state and experience in that regard. So I represent New Canaan, Darien, and Stamford. Obviously, Stamford, I know, has been in communication with your office on some projects already. New Canaan just hired a grant writer, so I do plan on communicating with them, or actually have already, and reaching out to your office on trying to get some funding for particularly the Safe Streets monies that may be available. And I know we're getting the slides sent to us. I was looking for them. I still don't have it yet, but hopefully soon. But I see that the one of the slides, I think it was the second or third, that there's $6 billion over 5 years, and that we've already received 2.2. I assume the 6 billion, the 2.2 that's already been received is out of that 6. So there's another about 4 billion left. Is that, it's not 8 billion that we were getting?
That's correct. Another 4 billion.
And the implementation timelines vary by program. I see that. And I'm just curious, can you give us some examples on some implementation timelines that are maybe a good example? Like, obviously, bridge reconstruction and whatnot on a big project is obviously a longer timeline, but a safe school program, say 50,000 or 100,000, what's the timeline on something like that that you're seeing, or you would tell the municipalities to anticipate from the time of submission to the time of getting the money?
Great question. So just real quick, we've spoken to the gentleman who's been hired to do grants in New Canaan already. And I've spoken with First Selectwoman McNally from Darien. So if you could facilitate those meetings, that would be great. It'd be helpful to us. In addition to that, again, it depends on the program, the project. So the Safe Streets money that'll come out this spring for the Connecticut towns, about 90% of that is planning and design money. So they'll get that by July 1 or a couple months after the award is given. But implementation in terms of actual building, now Gold Star, they're out there. They've got cranes in the air. They're ready they're working. However, it just depends on the complexity of the project, how big it is, and where it's happening. So it's tough to say, but for, like you said, for the smaller grants, 6 months, 6 months to a year is not an unreasonable amount of time.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I know you've got a busy schedule, so I really appreciate you being here and answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I see the good representative of Fairfield and Bridgeport has her hand raised. Representative McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, Commissioner, for being here. I will acknowledge, as many of us are, I came late to the presentation, so I'm going to have to catch up, but just wanted to ask a question that I recognize you may have discussed already, just about COGS, the Councils of Government, and wanting to just highlight the Safe Streets for All, for example. I believe it's a $5 million minimum, which is something that's difficult for an individual municipality to do, even if an individual municipality might be interested. In addition, there's a match required. So I know, for example, MetroCog has put in an application working together with the communities within MetroCog. And I wanted to just ask you what your thoughts were in terms of how do we help our municipalities with that match? Because with some of those minimums, it can be a really difficult number for communities. And also, even if folks have grant capacity, for example, in Bridgeport, they're pretty busy with the work that they have at hand already. So I'm wondering if you can kind of address that or just point me to earlier remarks. I'm happy to go back and listen to that in terms of how we can have our COGS help us to leverage those federal dollars when we're competing against county governments, some of whom are close to the size of much of our state. Thank you.
Those are great questions. I know everybody knows this, but our COGS are now recognized by the federal government as quote counties for grant purposes, which has been something we've asked for years. I would say that the local match is a concern. However, we're not there yet to where it becomes a real crisis issue. I also like to see how much ARPA money is available. Like I said, I've met with some mayors and asked them to put a reserve on some of their ARPA money in anticipation that they haven't spent it and that they would be getting a grant, which the feds before said you couldn't spend, but now you can spend towards infrastructure. So there may be an outlet there, but most of the Safe Streets for All grants that were put in were all planning and design. So we're not, when we get to the implementation, that's going to be the big number, right? That's going to be, that new intersection is going to cost you $15 million. That's where we're going to have to see how we handle that or manage that. But it's something that is a concern, but and also process as you go through that. Many of you live in towns that you know the process is very convoluted and takes time. And once the budget's set, it's set, and you can't change it. Those are things that we'll have to tackle together. So I don't have a good answer for you on that. But it also nationally has been bubbling up as we meet with our national group about how's New Jersey handling this? How is other states handling this?
Thank you for that answer, Commissioner. And I appreciate very much that we'll all kind of keep our eye on that as we're going forward, because even with some of those planning dollars, you're right, it's really tight for a lot of communities. So I appreciate the opportunity to work together with you and the work that you're doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. And again, thank you, Commissioner, as well as Steve and Taylor, who I know are both doing a lot of work on ensuring that the dollars are directed appropriately and fulfilling the needs of the towns, which has been obviously a focus of today's meeting. So thank you for your thorough presentation. Again, if you can get that over to Samuel Clark, that would be terrific. We'll make sure we disseminate it to all of the members of the committee for their perusing, and we will see you in a short while, those of us who are Finance Committee members. So we'll look forward to that presentation as well. For the committee's benefit, our next meeting is an oversight hearing on Wednesday prior to session at 10:30 a.m. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.